For my personality, I don't really do a lot of sales on social media. To me, it's more of like that credibility piece to where, if you have a good conversation with somebody, somebody is going to go fact checking, right? And look for
Yeah.
receipts. And so, like, what you want is that you have brand awareness, which is like, how relevant are you in the community?
Mhm.
When they do find you, if they do, right? Then what kind of content and information are you putting out there?
What's one tip that you want to share if for everybody so that people can have their customers become their ambassadors?
Yeah, I think transparency is a huge part for us. I think just being honest, we don't do a lot of paid advertising just because of the nature of our business.
Mhm.
Um, but when you do bring on a client, actually celebrate them.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Your Lab Central. Today I'm joined with Andrew. So Andrew, would you like to tell our audience why they should be excited about this conversation?
Oh yeah, I think that nowadays digital content is going to be the future of how we collaborate with each other, learn different things in an educational way, providing different perspectives. The days of having to track down people and set them aside for an hour in a conference room or a boardroom meeting, just kind of over it. So this is a great opportunity to have an open conversation about all sorts of topics, from finance, financial planning, and just be able to learn from behind your desk, or at your home, rather than having to go get dressed up to a stuffy boardroom. So I'm excited.
So Andrew, I was just reading about you. So you've done a lot of work in finance and just built yourself from the bottom. So what are some lessons that you want to share today? Anything specific in particular?
Yeah, no, I think with us in the financial services business, I think that there's just a lot of false narratives about
Mhm.
around what it takes to get started. A lot of the clients that we work with, are really just kind of in that phase of analysis paralysis.
Yep.
And I mentioned, being able to find a really great platform to be educated, but the flip side of that is if you get too much information, you kind of feel like you're surrounded by people that have already achieved what you're looking to do. And so, where we really kind of shine is being able to break it down to the fundamentals, learning to see what good habits are and how to build on those, and try to have a partner along the way too, for the good and bad, and having some positive feedback as well.
Yeah. So when you started out, right, did you started out with a job and then left it in between just taking that decision? What was the analysis that you did? Okay, we'll get to the analysis paralysis part later, but let's talk about what was the analysis that you did when you shifted from a job to a full-time entrepreneurship role.
Yeah, so I think that, more than anything, regardless of what's going on in your life, I think the most important thing is to have like a positive belief in yourself, to have a little bit of a vision, and be willing to have kind of like the the belief in yourself that defies logic and reason. I think, today's day and age, I mean, there's so many outside influences with social media, that sometimes it can be really hard, to be your worst critic. But I think, at the end of the day, especially when it comes to like talking to younger people, if all you can bet on is yourself, I feel like that's a pretty good position to be in. In the corporate worlds, I mean, we have so many different metrics that we need to kind of achieve. But when we're betting on ourselves, I mean, we're our biggest supporter, our worst critic, but we can be, the good and the bad. And I think for myself early on, I knew kind of what I wanted to be in through for the first couple of jobs that I had right out of college. Um, I learned that I wanted to be around people, and I learned that I was, strong in math and finances and things like that. I just needed to figure out the path in order to have that platform, and education was a lot of it. And I think that that really kind of helped find me on that journey. And then it's just a question of how do I get in front of more people? And those are the things that we always try to struggle, even today. So
But you realized that you had a few set of skills that were good, right? And then there were a few things that you wanted to do. But finding that exact match, right? The set of skills that you have and the set of things that you do, and then finding the combination that lets you monetize. How difficult was that?
Oh, it was really hard. I think that everybody that ends up in a good place has probably more failure stories than they do success stories, which is great because, in golf, I played golf in college, and they always say there's no pictures on a scorecard. It's always just, looking back into it, you just see the end of the score at the end of the day, and that's how you kind of evaluate yourself. But I think that, when it comes to career field, coming out of college, you have a little bit of a basis of knowledge of some different experience. But when you start to really put yourself in different situations, you learn what your strengths and your weaknesses are.
Right.
And you learn some small aspects of business that you
Uh,
enjoy and some things that you don't. Um, and so you kind of pick up those little pieces along the way, can kind of navigate. And like I mentioned, just wanted to be around people, learning to be able to be around people in uncomfortable situations, I think is really great. And then transitioning over to how you monetize it. So,
yeah.
um, one of the biggest transitions for me is out of college, I got put into the finance world,
Right.
knew I wanted to be more around relationships and education. And so I had taken a little bit of a sidestep into a more of a cold calling, trying to build relationships over the phone. And I was really
Yeah.
good at having those difficult conversations with people. What's your date of birth? What's your social? How much money do you make? Those kind of just stuffy things that even we have a hard time with our spouses talking about. Um, but then you transition to that into a cold call environment where now
Right.
you're doing it without somebody in front of you. And so
Yeah.
I got comfortable in that environment. And then I just, how do you monetize on it? So um, going from the cold call world back to the networking world, took the skills that I had built with building rapport, having those good conversations, and now throwing
Yeah.
it into how do I give myself a platform to share from an educational perspective? Um, a lot of salesmen out there. And I'm based in Dallas, Fort Worth. So, like getting into a room of people that are trying to sell you their products
Yeah.
and just coming from the approach of like, hey, let's have a conversation, I think is a little bit of a fish out of water kind of thing. And it catches
Yeah.
people a little bit off guard and, start to break down those barriers.
Yeah.
And, I think after you get past the monetization stage, it's like, now how do I not be okay with not being able to work with everybody? So then you kind of, try to find that happy balance.
Yeah. Now, since you talked about cold calling and then having that rapport kind of conversation with people, so I get a lot of calls every day, right? Cold calls trying to sell me some financial product. Okay, could be anything. But every time I've never had this opportunity or had this, I don't know, luck to call it, where a salesman would say that, yeah, I want to talk about this rather than just saying I'm calling from this bank and we're trying to sell this to you. So, how does a salesman make this transition? That rather than opening with the introduction, how do you take that?
Yeah, so I can only speak from my personal experience, and
Yeah.
I'm by no means a professional at any of this stuff. But I think for me, the mentality that I took was one, I wanted to be able to know my product so well that I knew the answers to the questions before they were asked,
Mhm.
right? And I think that sometimes, especially in like a commission-only world, we're so focused on results and commissions
Mhm.
that there's that kind of lull where you're building a business, you need clients in order to stay in business, but you're still learning as well. And I think that taking that piece really slowly at the very beginning, you can preemptively understand exactly like what the other side of that conversation is going to be.
Yeah.
Um, so having that kind of like mindset as well going up to it, because I did cold calling and then I went into networking with a bunch of strangers and then I did door knocking in
Okay.
Texas in August, So
Okay.
it was just, 100 degrees, you're in a suit.
Fair.
I learned how to like, kind of balance that out. Um, but then the other thing that I would kind of take from that is my perspective was always I'll give two pieces of information about myself before I ever ask for one in return. So by that meaning, like before I, let's say we're talking about financial products, right? And I want to ask you, what do you do for work? What's your net worth, or how much money do you have invested right now? What if I told you that, oh my gosh, like stock market's crazy right now. I mean, like I've been following Tesla for the last couple weeks, and man, that earnings report was crazy. My daughter, we've got a lot of our money in her 529 in Tesla, for example. How do you feel about that? Right. And you start to break down those barriers. Now you know I have a daughter. Now you know that I have money in the market. I am knowledgeable about the earnings report that just came
Right.
out. So now you've learned a little bit about me.
Mhm.
And psychology kind of works in a funny way where, not that I'd use the word like obligated, but
Yeah.
now that you have a little bit of information on me, it makes you more able and more comfortable to
Yeah.
be able to share a little bit about yourself. And if you just do those little micro wins over a period of time, like
Yeah.
you can have a really great conversation, and an hour from now, you've made a friend. And that's when that real ask of like, hey, look, like we've had a great conversation. I've learned about your kids, I've learned about your wife, you're a little bit about your portfolio. Do you want to grab coffee and see like how we can kind of collaborate together?
Yeah.
It's not always about like just building rapport or selling, but like that sell becomes a whole lot easier when you have rapport than when it doesn't. So
That's
too
true.
many people skip over that too quickly.
Mhm. Now, I want to go back to the analysis paralysis that we mentioned, right? Now, as an entrepreneur, you must have gone through the ups and downs, right? But in this day and age, we have a lot of information bombardment that's coming from us across different avenues, social media, internet, AI, ChatGPT, Perplexity is out there giving you all kinds of information and different frameworks to do the same thing, right? Now, as an entrepreneur, how do you look at all of these data streams or information streams and then decide which one is the best for you and probably not get stuck in this slump called analysis paralysis?
Yeah, no. I mean, that's something that I think we all have to deal with. For me personally, I think just because maybe I'm a numbers person, I try to look for consistencies. And so if you're looking at all these different platforms, you have to compare the results and see what is kind of common among those different recommendations. That's usually something that I've done is, you can Google or, like you mentioned, ChatGPT, you say, what are the best platforms for XYZ? And
Mhm.
if you start looking into, oh, this one was mentioned three or four times,
Yeah.
then you can kind of go down that direction. Especially when it comes to finances, I think, because everything is so subjective.
Mhm.
And I kind of view everything like, the CEO and janitor approach, where,
Okay.
you could have the CEO and janitor be completely different, realms of life,
Yeah.
but they might be the same age. And so if you go into social media, or just in internet in general, take everything with a grain of salt. Do a little bit of due diligence and be educated on it, and then find those common behaviors. Um, and in the financial world and in investments and whatnot, usually good behaviors end up turning out better than
Yeah.
just having good ideas. Right. And being able to save, reoccurring ways, in good times and bad, budgeting, those types of things. Um, but try to take it as a grain of salt and do a little bit of due diligence before ever convincing yourself of anything being a fact, I think is a good way to think about it.
Right. Now, I was about to ask you about, yeah, we you talked about social media, so yeah, I was about to go down that path. So let's just talk about it. How have you been using social media as a business or for personal branding? Let's talk about it separately.
Yeah, so it's always been fun for me. I'm not a big social media guy. I've been told that I have a face for Spotify, face for radio. So it's one of those things that I think for me, in my experience, social media today is a lot different than it was 10 years ago, whenever I kind of, really started building it out. For my personality, I don't really do a lot of sales on social media. To me, it's more of like that credibility piece to where, if you have a good conversation with somebody, somebody is going to go fact checking, right? And look for
Yeah.
receipts. And so, like, what you want is that you have brand awareness, which is like, how relevant are you in the community?
Mhm.
When they do find you, if they do, right? Then what kind of content and information are you putting out there? So, if you go onto your social media platforms and you've got nothing but promotional items of like, hey, buy now today, some people are going to be like, wow, this guy's like constantly trying to, put out the ask for buying products. But if you're out there and you're like, hey, this is a value add that I'm doing to people that are following along, that maybe you might be able to apply with or without being a client.
Yeah.
A lot of the times it's just being like available whenever somebody's at that point where they're ready to ask.
Mhm.
Um, and with finances, we always say that like those are the most intimate details of our life, to the point that spouses don't even like talking about finances.
Mhm.
So like you can go and I can speak to my personal experience with my wife, so I can go out there and I can say a few things passively, plant this seed, plant this seed, plant this seed, and then all of a sudden a week later she's like, hey, like what was it about that the washer and dryer that was like making that noise? And I'm like, hey, well, that's we need to have that conversation now, but you were comfortable to ask about it. If I would have come out there and just told you, it would have been like, hey, like calm down, like don't worry about it. But with finances, it's so vulnerable, trying to open up and be like, my life is a mess right now. Can you help me get back together? So, having that brand awareness piece, having that safe place for people to find information, and then being able to provide that consistency, to be able to have a customer, a future customer, come and find you whenever they're ready to discuss.
So that's from a personal branding experience, right? And I do agree. I mean, when people go out, rather than going for the sell, they're trying to create credibility about their own personality and the knowledge that they have. Sharing it basically creates the whole environment around the community. We're saying that, yeah, this person is somebody who has the knowledge and the information, and yeah, you can go back to them. And if not, get sold something, they'll at least try to solve your problem itself first, rather than trying to sell you something. Now let's talk about
100%.
the business that you've been doing. Is there something that's working along pretty nice on social media, or is it like, or you
Yeah.
don't have to
So,
even use it? Is it like that?
yeah, so I mean, I think that over the last couple of years or so, content has been a lot more easier to produce and to come up with different things. I think just to try to come from different angles, and try to be able to provide some different advice on different topics, I think is a great way to kind of keep in contact. For me, I've seen a shift. A lot of people that have been going from maybe historically been typing into Google and looking for Google reviews. And it might just be a niche thing to our market here in Dallas Fort Worth, but being able to go into community pages, or going into networking environments and say, rather than looking for paid advertising, which could be from Google reviews, or maybe you see this really one-sided, very jagged comment review on a Google page where you're like, man, was this person like compensated through like a gift card or like incentivized to do this? Or maybe they were held hostage at the restaurant. They're like, hey, if you want to be able to leave, we're going to have to ask you to do a Google review for $5 off or something. But what they're doing is they're going into community pages and they're saying, hey, even if it's anonymously, this is something that I'm dealing with. Give me a testimony of something that you've dealt with so I can go and do my due diligence that way. And to me, that's been super impactful for my business is
Okay.
finding the local community, being able to say, this is what I do, having your clients be active in it as well.
Mhm.
And so that way, when the next person says, this is something that I'm dealing with, they can be like, oh my gosh, not without sharing too many private details of their life, but
Yeah.
this is where I was and this is who helped me in this situation. Um, and where that might have been 50 years ago at your church or at your employer or, at some sort of baseball event where those things are happening, it's all online now. And the beautiful thing is once you have one, it's on there forever and people can look for common themes and questions. And, those recommendations can come in, until Facebook no longer exists. So,
Now, there's one thing that I want to ask about. How are you actually convincing your clients, per se, to engage in the community on your behalf, right? Because that is something that is golden for any entrepreneur or a business, right? Where the customer itself becomes the ambassador for the business or the product or the service. Now, what's one tip that you want to share, if for everybody, so that people can have their customers become their ambassadors?
yeah, I think transparency is a huge part for us. I think just being honest, we don't do a lot of paid advertising just because of the nature of our business.
Mhm.
Um, but when you do bring on a client, actually celebrate them. And so one of the things that we do is whenever we have a new household come on board, we actually send them a gift, to be able to say, we look forward to working together. Thank you for your trust and taking that leap of faith with us. We take that very serious.
Mhm.
But one of the things is that too many salespeople are great in like a selling environment, but when it comes to taking that and transitioning that over to a relationship,
Right.
it becomes very cold because you're now focused on the next
Mhm.
sale, right?
Yeah.
Once that check cashes, baby, we got to move on. And so, like, one of the things that, I think taking that extra step and just being like, hey, a majority of my business is grown through word of mouth organically. So
Right.
the best compliment that you could possibly pass along for me is to tell your friend, your family member, your coworker, a member of your church, anybody that you bump into, you don't need to go out and sell for me, but
Yeah.
just be comfortable in sharing your experience. And that's all I can ask for. I'll do my best to make sure that your experience is stellar, top notch. And if you feel like it's appropriate whenever somebody comes to you and asking in confidence, share your experience, and that, if not totally okay, but if you feel inclined to do so, that is the highest compliment. Um, and for us in the financial services business, there's not a lot of compensating for things like that, but we
Yeah.
definitely celebrate our clients whenever we find out that, hey, this person said that person brings their kids. Like we keep track of it for sure.
No, it's one thing. I mean, I don't know if that's a tip or something, but have you thought of separating the teams for maintaining the relationship, and then the sales team obviously looks at sales? Have you
Yeah.
ever thought of that, and how has it worked out, or you didn't?
Yeah, so we've kind of juggled with the idea. For us, the relationship side is so big on the front end of a relationship. They're putting so much trust in us and like the
Yeah.
face of the business.
Mhm.
And so being able to hand that off, I think that there's a certain type of client, right? That understands that obviously they want to work with somebody that's self-sufficient, that's established, or else they wouldn't do business with you.
Okay.
But there's other people that really, kind of get passionate about helping small businesses in your
Yeah.
community. And that's why I feel like it's so impactful. And the smaller you are, the more they'll try to pick up and be the wind
Yeah.
in your sails. And so it depends on the model of the business that you have.
Mhm.
We have like what we call like client success managers, where like once they come on board, they're handling a lot of the onboarding process, they're handling a lot of the customer service. But for our model specifically, because of licensing and compliance and all that kind of stuff, we're the only one providing the advice. So it's just a lot of that, outside of the box thinking of like, who is putting the mental energy into thinking about the anniversaries, the kids'
Yeah.
birthdays? These are some of the notes that we've had about, oh my gosh, they love baseball. How can we be able to try to incorporate that into our long-term value adds each and every year? So, but a lot of different ways to try to just be a little bit extra.
Yeah, that's very important in the in finance or in the services industry, right? Trying to know your client and trying to know the small things that they're interested in, and trying to create the whole environment around that. Thank you so much. I mean, Andrew, it was just great talking about your experience. Uh, Random question. How many people, if you say you've out there helped with your services, what's the number of people's lives that you've touched? If you want to.
Oh yeah, I mean lives that we've touched. I mean that's kind of like the X factor thing. You don't know exactly how deep, the advice goes. I mean we handle about probably say about 700 households here in the United States. Different people, especially after COVID. I felt like we're forced into an environment where they had to get comfortable with this virtual environment. And so as migration happens, job changes, moving, retiring, that'll take you in different places, which is really great because it's made us more comfortable with Zoom. But yeah, about 700 households are the ones that we currently have under management, scattered all over the United States, and we actually just had an entire new set of clients that are over in Europe now that work remotely and in the airline industry. So it's really great. I'd like to say an infinite amount of families and lives that we've touched,
Yeah.
and a lot more to come.
Okay, you just opened up one more question for yourself.
Yeah, let's do it.
How are you looking at this expansion into Europe? If you would even call that an expansion into another new continent.
Yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, like being able to kind of like move over to Europe, I mean, being able to have a lot of custodians here in the United States is just not completely endless yet without having like a lot of banks and custodial platforms internationally.
Mhm.
But I think, in a more broader stroke, like the COVID environment of remote work has opened up a lot of opportunities for not only people in the United States to live in places that have better quality of life. And
Yeah.
I went to Spain in March, and just being able to see a lot of how many Americans are other places,
Mhm.
but also how many people in Europe are actually working for United States-based jobs. And that's always been a struggle for the last 50 years or so, is like, people living internationally, how do you take advantage of the income from the United States, but living in better quality of life and cost of living places around the globe? And so where there are Americans and where there are people working in the United States, there's people that are potential clients. So we got to be on it at all times.
Right.
Virtually, that works great. And I think that, the more that business owners are available and open to having phone conversations and Zoom calls, I think that, that the more clients that you open your books to and potential future revenue.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, and I do agree with that because yeah, COVID has created that opportunity for people to work remotely and even trust remotely because that was a huge problem that a lot of businesses were facing, right? Creating that X trust factor over the internet. So thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you for joining me in on this episode. Before we close, where can people get in touch with you, know more about your work and your business?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, we've got a Facebook page and a website that anybody can look us up on. We've got a lot of educational content that we put out there, as well as just a lot of, great information to know in general. Our website is pwealthmgmt.com. And our Facebook page that I put a lot of content out on, as well as our newsletter. If you just go into Facebook and do the @ symbol, pwealthmgmt, that should be able to pull it up. It has my name on it. It's a free thing to kind of subscribe to and has a lot of great content. So love any questions or anything like that. If anybody has any great critiques or positive feedback is always much more appreciated. But
Thank you once again, Andrew. Thank you for joining me in on this episode of Your Lab Central. To the audience, if you like the conversation, do leave a like. The comment section is always open for comments, reviews. If you liked any specific part of the conversation, do let us know. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe before you close if you're not subscribed yet. Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrew, for joining in. And yeah, thanks to the audience as well. Thank you so
no,
much.
absolutely. Thank you for the time.